not in Kansas anymore.
Welcome to Mo Banshee's Lair, Visionary Talk Radio on GameConRadio.com. We rock your world. Okay, our guest tonight is Stanton Friedman, nuclear physicist, UFO lecturer. He also walks on water, but don't ask me to tell you who gave me that information. He is originally a New Jersey man, and that, in my book, makes him wonderful just for that. So forget everything else. No. How are you, Stan?
Well, it's late here in beautiful Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. I'm an hour ahead of New Jersey.
Yes. So we're all still standing. It's October 14th, and we were supposed to have some huge sighting thing going on here. The Goodchild, her name is Blossom. She's from Australia. She's the wayward sister of Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, Peter's other sisters from the Cottontail stories. She said that we were going to see spaceships, but they weren't going to bother us. The extraterrestrials were just going to let us know they're there. So what's your take on it all?
They're going to do it for 72 hours, too. Which is
a
message, you know.
Yeah.
Well, when I first heard about this, sometime back, and everything goes in my gray basket to begin with, maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Violet.
Not black, not white, why do I have to commit myself? I don't know enough. And I read some of the long pieces that were out there, and half a dozen, more than that, people said, have you heard about this? What do you think about it? And I said, what's there to think? I don't know. Maybe it's true. I can't prove it's not. Let's wait until October 14th. Well, October 14th is here, and to the best of my knowledge, this sighting of an incredible, huge object hasn't occurred. Now, of course, it's going to be midnight here shortly, so there's still time in the rest of the world, I guess, or at least the rest of the United States. But, there have been, and I was just watching a video of her YouTube thing, and she doesn't look like a crazy person, and she obviously believes that she's channeling the light people and stuff, and everything should be love. That should be the word instead of conflict, and who could argue with that? And
I can.
You don't think it should be love?
Kill them all, let God sort them out. The Marine way. No, I jest. Yes, we all would love it to be a loving, kind world. We really would.
Well, one of the things I try to tell people when they say, why don't they land, on the White House lawn and these other silly notions, I try to point out, in that case, incidentally, I hate to tell you this, but the President of the United States doesn't speak for 6.5 billion Earthlings. Would you believe that? He has trouble speaking for 300 million Americans,
He has trouble opening doors on occasion.
Oh, damn.
The kicker here is that anybody from afar, looking at this planet for any length of time, would immediately recognize that this is a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare. We shoot first and ask questions later. A planet, this year, a total of $1 trillion will be spent on things military, half by the United States and the other half by the rest of the world. In the same year, about 30,000 children die needlessly every single day of
starvation,
preventable disease and starvation. Now, there's something out of whack with that comparison. So,
that's what I say.
Major activity is tribal warfare, and of course they're not here to say, hey, let's go out for a beer or a cuppa or whatever. Look, we need to finish the job that Copernicus started. Dear old Nick, back in 1543, allowed a book to be published that he'd written earlier, but had the good sense not to have published until the year he died, because in that he suggested that indeed the Earth, this is hard to believe, the Earth is not the center of the universe. Now, he only moved the center over one step to the sun. And the book was banned for 300 years, you understand, because the church thought that it was at the center of the universe and, couldn't stand being taken out of the center. Okay, now we recognize that, gee whiz, it's a very big universe, much bigger than Copernicus had any right to think it might be, than we had 100 years ago or so. So what this does, recognizing that flying saucers are real and coming to planet Earth, but it also gives us a different sense of perspective. That we haven't been around very long compared to the age of the neighborhood. Forget the universe, 13.5 billion years or so. But how about the local neighborhood even? The Earth has been suitable for life for 1 billion years. In other words, the air was breathable, the water was drinkable, and probably a lot cleaner than it is now, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
So the notion that we are the ultimate, everything has slowly been gathering steam, and our brains are coming out, and now here we are at the top of the heap. This seems to me like utter nonsense. A guy named Henrik Schliemann figured out where the city of Troy ought to be. This is from the Iliad, the Greek legend. And he figured out a place in Turkey, and the historians were saying, what do you mean you're looking for Troy? There is no Troy. That's all myth. Myth, If there was a Troy, we would know about it. Well, Henry was rich, and he could afford to pay people to dig down 75 feet. And you know what? They found Troy. And that's only from back a few thousand years, let's say, a few thousand years. Well, okay, how much of the planet has even been examined down 75 feet? Darn little is my answer.
Yeah.
What I'm suggesting is we have no indication that we're any inherently smarter than, say, the Greeks or the Trojans. We've got a lot of technology they didn't have. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, and all that stuff. But when you boil it down, our thinking capability isn't any better than theirs. If you read Greek literature, it is not juvenile literature. These were not primitive beings. Now, if you stand back and say, oh, you mean there may be beings out there that are a bit older than we are, a lot older than we are, and my favorite target, and this is discussed in detail in my book, Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, by myself and Kathleen Marden, who's Betty's niece and did most of the work. There was a star map seen on board a UFO. A brilliant woman named Marjorie Fish built 26 models of the local galactic neighborhood and was able to identify the stars in that map. And the base stars, galactic neighborhood headquarters, if you will, seem to be Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 reticuli, to which the normal response is, who cares? Never heard of those dumb-sounding stars. What's special about them? Well, as it happens, there are a couple of special things. They're only 39.3 light years away, so they're just down the street. And the galaxy's 100,000 light years across, so we're talking down the street, around the corner. That's the first thing.
Oh, wow.
Secondly, they are the closest to each other pair of sun-like stars in our neighborhood. Now, we're out in the boondocks here. Next star over is 4.3 light years away. But these two stars from each other, they're only an eighth of a light year apart. That means they're 35 times closer to each other than the sun is to the next star over. We're in the boonies. These guys got a next-door neighbor. From a planet around one looking over at the other, you can see those planets. They don't need to guess. Now, here's the real kicker. Those two stars are a cool billion with a B, years older than the sun. So the two obvious comments, of course, are that there's a heck of a lot more incentive for interstellar travel when you got a neighbor just down the street, as they do. And these are two sun-like stars, and only 5% or so qualify. The second thing is, with that billion years, my rule is that technological progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. The future is not an extrapolation of the past. So they've had plenty of time to develop their own civilization, their own techniques for communication, travel, anything else you want. And I'd say one thing I'm sure of about every advanced civilization, not a lot, but one, and that is they're concerned about their own survival and security. Everybody we know is, every, quote, advanced, unquote, civilization is. That being the case, you got to keep tabs on the primitives in the neighborhood, but only close tabs on those primitives who show signs of being able to bother you. And boy, did we in spades at World War II at the end, any visiting neighborhood spy, as he's watched what's happened over the past, from, say, 1900 on, would recognize that these idiot Earthlings, A, they destroyed 1,700 cities. What a mess we made. Two, we killed 50 million of our own kind. 50 million.
So you kind of equated... You equate it to like the day the Earth stood still. If they come here, it's pretty much to say, don't come around us till you get your act together.
Right. I think it's they're quarantining us. If you were an alien, would you want us out there? I don't.
I live here and I don't want to be here. I live here and I don't want to be here.
Well, Mo always said, she always said, if they're intelligent life, why in the hell would they be coming here? I mean,
to keep us from going out there.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, really.
If I do a lot of traveling because I've lectured now in all 50 states and 9 provinces and 16 other countries, over 700 lectures. So I get around. And when I go through O'Hare Airport, for example, or even Newark Airport, I find that people are traveling for many different reasons, not just one. They're not all there for the same purpose.
Right.
I was at Newark Airport to catch a nonstop flight to Hong Kong a few years back, would you believe?
Wow.
Flew over the Soviet Union. That was a strange feeling, over Siberia.
Wow.
I look at the map to make sure, am I really? Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, most of the people at Newark Airport were not flying to Hong Kong to give lectures about flying saucers.
No.
Which is what I was doing. So what I'm saying is, in the book, Flying Saucers and Science, I have a whole bunch of reasons for coming to planet Earth. It's the honeymoon capital of this corner of the galaxy, or they're being punished. Spend 2 weeks near Earth, that's punishment to last a lifetime. Gas food lodging next exit. Or, let's check on our colony. Who won the prize? There are all kinds of reasons you can. They're graduate students doing their thesis research on the development of a
They're environmentalists. They're environmentalists proving how we destroy a planet without even trying.
Yeah, this is an experiment that failed. What worries me is, are they going to let us go on? That pretty much is it. Wipe it clean and start again.
I don't know who mixed this batch, but somebody dumped it down the toilet.
Yeah, of course, this could be the Devil's Island of this corner of the galaxy. They dumped all the bad boys and girls here, and that's why we're so nasty to each other. And don't forget, Blossom will tell you this, that a lot of the early settlers in Australia, and the state of Georgia as well, were prisoners. They shipped them off there from England, and they're proud of it in Australia. They're not so proud of it in Georgia. But,
so this chick, what is she, some kind of psychic or something that she came up with this stuff?
She's a clear channel. They transmit to her lessons of light, and she just is the middle person, the transmitter, the conduit, if you will. And, there have been a lot of such people around, and there are a lot of people who claim to be in touch with somebody out there, not always extraterrestrial, of course. And so I think she means well, and she would love to have people think of love instead of what we do on this planet. We make love and we make war. I mean, that's a great combination.
And we make babies, lots of babies.
Oh, yes, and if you're with a certain political party, you don't do anything for those countries where you might help them reduce their birth rate. Because,
right.
It's
better to see a baby starve to death than stop it from being born.
Yeah. And so it's a strange world, and I think that, I get asked a lot of questions, and I've tried to answer them in the new book because I think people need ammunition. I've been disgusted. I mean, I'm a dual citizen of the United States and Canada. I live in Canada, but
that means you get to pay taxes in both countries. Whoopee.
Well, you notice that, but I also get medical care here, which I wouldn't down there.
Yeah, this is why I don't claim my Irish citizenship, because I'm not paying two Caesars.
The thing is that when we look at the larger picture, we live in a world in which people buy into all kinds of nonsense all the time. I saw some of the campaign the other night. I don't want to go political on you, but there's an awful lot of unbelievable nonsense being spread around which people are believing, not backed by any evidence whatsoever. What I've tried to do in the book is to provide the evidence, to give the ammunition to the people who say, hey, what's going on here? Maybe Friedman knows, and so they'll listen, and I'll answer their questions. I raise the objections of the nasty, noisy negativists, as I call them when I'm being polite, and deal with them. I don't ignore them. There's a whole chapter, for example, on you can get here from there. And there's a whole chapter on the cult of SETI, S-E-T-I, silly effort to investigate is what that stands for.
Oh, damn.
Tell us how you really feel, Stan. Don't hold anything back.
I like that.
There's a whole chapter on the cosmic Watergate, and there's a whole chapter on science fiction, science, and UFOs. And it comes as a surprise to a lot of people who expect that, hey, science fiction writers, they'd be excited about UFOs. Oh, no, they're not. And I deal with the actual statements made by Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Ben Bova. Great writers, all three of them, but they sure didn't know what they were talking about when they wrote about flying saucers. And so, the basic rule is have facts in hand before putting computer in gear, as far as I'm concerned. And I've tried to do that. There is a chapter on what does it all mean. So what difference does it make if aliens are coming here? One thing it means is that somebody got through this stage of too much technology and not enough sociology. That's where we are. I mean, anybody who spends their money the way we do is clearly a little bit sick. And we talk about love and light and taking care of people, and that's not where we're at. Look around the planet. I mean, it doesn't compute that way. So there's a lot to the subject of flying saucers. They have a whole chapter on 5 large-scale scientific studies. And I have it there because when I normally lecture an hour and a half or so, you can't, how much stuff can you get in an hour and a half lecture? But in that whole chapter, I cover these studies in detail. And one of the things that aggravates me, frankly, about the SETI cultists is that they never refer to the large-scale scientific studies. They keep saying, there is no evidence. What do you mean there is no evidence? You mean you're too lazy to go look at it? I mean, I include it in my books. They don't read my books. I read theirs, you understand. But
yeah. Well, they're too smart to read your books, aren't they?
I guess that's what it is, because...
Well, ignorant people know so much they don't have to read anything. They can just go with what they say. They don't have to look to anybody else or, check out other opinions, You and I both know that's not the truth.
No, it's not opinions, really, that concern me. It's there are 4 basic
Facts.
rules for debunkers, and that includes the SETI cultists. One is what the public doesn't know. I'm not going to tell them. 2, don't bother me with the facts. My mind's made up. 3, if you can't attack the data, attack the people. It's easier, and nobody will know the difference. How come saucers are only seen by idiots out in the country kind of thing, which is absolute nonsense. The 4th rule, of course, is do your research by proclamation. Investigation is too much trouble. And again, nobody will know the difference anyway. And so I try to hold people to that standard. And, I've debated with Dr. Seth Shostak, for example, of the SETI Institute. And we were cordial to each other on the Queen Elizabeth II. We each got a free ride from England to New York, and each gave 3 lectures. And, so we were pleasant to each other. But we debated on Coast to Coast Radio, a program you may have heard of along the way.
Yes, we know Coast to Coast, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, we debated, and I got 57% of the vote. He got 33, and 10% said, I don't know. And so I take these people on. Well, recently in a column, we were on Larry King together in July, as a matter of fact. He says, well, Friedman claims that you should only have an opinion about flying saucers if you've investigated sightings, and that isn't true. A scientist can evaluate other scientists' work when he looks at what they've done and their papers and all the rest of this. And he misrepresented what I said. I didn't say he has to do any investigation of cases. I said if he's going to express an opinion about saucers, he's got to be familiar with the large-scale scientific studies. Otherwise, he's not entitled to an opinion. He doesn't need to go out and investigate. I mean, I know what he talks about because I did a weekly science commentary for CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company Radio here in Fredericton, for 6 years. I wasn't an expert in all those fields, but I read the papers. I did some looking around, did a lot of checking. And so, sure, I don't mind people giving an opinion. If you're a scientist, it has to be based on the evidence. If you want to preface your remarks with, look, I don't know anything about this subject, but here's my off-the-top of opinion, feel free. It's a free country. Everybody's entitled to, no matter how wrong their opinions are, to their opinions. But don't try to tell me they're scientific if you haven't looked at the evidence. And fortunately, there's a good sign. Last month, September, there was a week-long conference in Paris searching for other signatures. It was a SETI conference, 60 papers. And somebody did a blog about one of the papers by Alain Lebec. He looked at the question from a different viewpoint. He pointed out that there are some very good UFO sightings. He cited a multiple witness radar visual sighting that lasted for an hour, involved an RB-47 reconnaissance bomber out over the Gulf of Mexico, and then Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, and Oklahoma, with radar observation from the ground, 2 different radars, and from the plane, which was a very sophisticated airplane with very highly trained people. And he pointed out that, one of the things they observed was a 30 megahertz radio signal coming from this thing. And he says what we ought to try doing is broadcast on 3 megahertz and then stop and see if there's an answer. And he presented a very good case, this RB-47 case, and so on. I'm waiting with bated breath for the paper. I emailed him, and he's going to send me a copy of the full paper. I sent him a copy of my book, Flying Saucers and Science, and you can go to my website, www.stantonfriedman.com, find out about all 4 of my books and stuff like that. But so maybe, and there were 2 other papers that mentioned UFOs in a sensible kind of fashion. So I am curious as heck what the American contributors to the conference had to say, because they would never, ever talk about flying saucers, and not as if they knew anything anyway. And this guy did. So I'm encouraged. I'm optimistic. Maybe the world is beginning to see the light, if I can put it that way.
We're back to Peter Cottontail's sister, Blossom. Somebody in the chat room just asked us if you had addressed that, and I said, he did. He said they didn't show up. Yeah.
Maybe they went out for dinner.
Yeah. You know, like what is that Schwarzenegger movie or whoever that guy is, Sylvester Stallone, where the extraterrestrial looks like a crab and he comes here once a year to hunt? That weird
Predator.
That weird Predator? Yes,
yeah.
Predator, yes.
Oh.
You know, maybe they come here to hunt.
How do you like your humans, broiled or fried?
You know, I have a lot. Ed Kraft was on last week, and he said, well, you've got the believers, you got the non-believers, the two camps, and you just can't seem to get the scientists to get in the middle and start working. I said, well, you have a third group, and I'm in that group, and I don't give a shite. As long as they pay taxes and don't blow me up, I don't really care if they're coming or not, you know, because I'm dealing with too much here to worry about them. And I agree, we waste money killing things instead of trying to improve things here. I just don't understand where our governments are. Let me ask you something that I've been... and it's not specifically about the M12 papers, but let me ask you something. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Majestic 12, yes, I know.
Yeah, Majestic 12. I read a lot that a lot of them are questionable. Let me ask you: do you think that the government's and I personally can't even understand why they would want to do this, but do you think they kind of muddy the water just to keep everybody fighting amongst themselves about this?
Well, whatever the reason, yes, I think they do. It muddy the water. It's standard intelligence community activity. If good stuff gets out, you flood the world with crap, and you hope some of it rubs off on the good stuff. And so in my book, Top Secret Magic, M-A-J-I-C, which is all about the Majestic 12 documents, I demonstrate how a number of these are clearly fraudulent. I'm only interested in four, really, the Eisenhower briefing document, the Truman-Forrestal memo, and the Cutler-Twining memo, and maybe SOM 101, Standard Operating Manual. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. But my reasons for saying those are genuine and the others are fraudulent are all dependent on doing my homework. I've been to 20 archives, and if somebody'd pay me, I'd spend full time at them. You know? And so I've raised all the objections of the non-believers and demolished them. And on the other hand, I've shown that this document's a fraud because, see what it says here? That isn't true, you know, and what it says there, and so forth. And I found in 7 cases, I actually found original documents that have been published and were generally available, that somebody had scanned or Xeroxed the handwritten portions, retyped the text part, but made some mistakes along the way. For example, there's one memo that supposedly is a directive to General Nathan Twining, who was the Air Force Chief of Staff and then the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs under Eisenhower. Top military man, a World War II hero as well, incidentally. They had him being assigned to go to New Mexico to look at the saucer and stuff. And they said, when you're finished in New Mexico, go on to Sandia Corporation. Now, the memo that I found that has essentially exactly the same wording is to another general, a different general, who was a China expert, and they said Wiedemeyer was his name, General Wiedemeyer. And I found these in a book, Wiedemeyer Reports. It was instructions to Wiedemeyer to go to China, and when you're finished there, evaluating the situation, then go to Korea. Well, Korea isn't in China, but Sandia is in New Mexico. So that's a serious mistake. Besides which, it's dated the same date as the Wiedemeyer one, and we know that General Twining had gone to New Mexico on the 7th. I found his flight log. in a box that had been classified for many years. And so I dig, and I dig, and I dig some more. And I found 7 different documents that had been emulated. I mean, once you catch on to the trick, then you know what to look for. And there were a bunch of others that had wrong, flat-out wrong things, like light hydrogen, deuterium. Well, deuterium is heavy hydrogen. There's a bunch of stuff like that. So, yeah, I think that they were definitely disinformation. And, people may get upset when I use the word disinformation. It's a very important part of the Second World War. We managed to convince Hitler with some very subtle stuff that the landing in Europe, and he knew it was coming, was going to take place at Calais under General Patton. Subtle stuff like having some semi-innocent papers in the pocket of an officer who died and dumping it in the water off Spain where they knew the Germans would get access to it. And the whole point was to convince Hitler that, it's coming over there, not over here. When we landed at Normandy, the generals, German generals, immediately told Hitler, we need the reserves, bring up the reserve, the Americans are landing. No, they're really going to land over here. This is the attempt to deceive us. And they don't know that we know they're going to land down there. Well, by the time he finally got around to letting the reserves go, we had solidified the landing at Normandy, and disinformation is what did it. So, people shouldn't be...
This is what we did in Midway, is it not? We fed the Japanese some false information to prove that one of the codes was Midway they were using, and that's how they figured out they were going to nail Midway and not the other island. And that's the way of life, Feed them the wrong information, see how it all plays out.
Yeah, and it's standard practice. When we exploded the first A-bomb in New Mexico, Trinity site and White Sands Missile Range, July 16th, 1945, it was a very successful test. It was seen from 100 miles away, even though it was 5:30 in the morning. Now, they got to do something because sheriffs were getting called, what happened, etc. And so they put out a press release. An ammunition dump had blown up, and fortunately nobody was injured. And it was only after the explosions at Hiroshima and Nagasaki that, that ammunition dump, that was the first A-bomb.
Right,
what I'm saying is lying is required on certain occasions. I think they could tell us that we are being visited without telling us what they've learned from the technology where Osama can get at it. And there's a rule in security. You can't tell your friends without telling your enemies because they read the newspapers, they listen to the radio, they watch TV too. People don't seem to understand that. Well, why can't they tell us? And aren't we entitled to know everything? Look, I worked under security for 14 years. I absolutely resist the notion that we're entitled to know everything. There is a good reason for security. And you don't want to put, say you've got a new technique for detecting stuff moving in the atmosphere. You're going to publish that so Osama can get it? I mean, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
So,
we have a question.
Okay.
It's from Don Paranormal. The information on UFOs, is so protected, and they declassify it in a timely segments. She's wondering if you had opinions on how the timing is compared to the release of the information.
I'm not sure I know what you mean. There's plenty of stuff.
I'm reading what information on you. It's protected. I guess they have it for such a long time before they declassify it. Do you think it's necessary for them to do this?
If you want to keep it secret, you can't tell anybody. That's how security works. You need a need to know. But remember that there is no automatic declassification on classified documents. Some people told me, Stan, after 20 years, it's all declassified. No, it isn't. I've been to 20 archives. The Eisenhower Library, which is a great place to do research, and I've spent literally weeks there. The Eisenhower Library has over 300,000 pages of classified material. He went out of office, Eisenhower did, in 1961. That's a long time ago. The headquarters Air Force files from 1948 to 1955 about at the National Archives, just the headquarters files, are over 9,000 feet of material. That's shelf space, in other words. That's roughly 1,000 four-drawer filing cabinets. And there's still plenty of classified material in there. And you don't go wandering around in the archives and say, oh, I found one I like. Would you officially mark this declassified? You don't get down there. You look at a finder's aid and you tell them what boxes you want, and they bring you the boxes, and it may have just withdrawal sheets. You want frustration. You think you found stuff that's going to be hot stuff, and it's still classified.
We have a caller, and he's from England, so I want to let him ask his question because he's really calling from a long distance. Spooky, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Spook.
Good.
How you doing,
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks. Right, I've got a few questions, so I've just picked a couple out. In 97, you stated, frankly, I'm sick and tired of the U.S. Air Force lying to the public, the press and members of Congress about UFOs. Now, that was about the U.S. Air Force. Also, at the time, you actually set a challenge to Colonel Richard Weaver and Captain James McAndrew to debate with you at any time, at any place. You said about those that these two officers have made a mockery out of a serious investigation. Did anybody actually take you up on that offer?
What do you think? Of course not. I would take any of them on. As a matter of fact, I've debated at the Oxford University Debating Society.
Why do you think they actually turned you down? Or in better words, ignored you?
They ignored it because they know darn well that they can't defend their position. The two reports they did on Roswell, and they lied about me in both of them, which rather aggravates me, to tell you the truth. Weaver did one and McAndrew did the other. Those two reports make a mockery of truth, reality, honesty, all those other good things. I've written in depth about them in my books, and, you know, what can I say? Why would they take me on? They know they can't defend the position, so it doesn't surprise me. Now, there are others I've challenged, and I'm still waiting, you know. Michael Shermer was one that I took on. He's head of the Skeptics Society, and we went at it for 3 hours.
Do you ever think anybody will take you up on an offer?
Well, not from the Air Force. I doubt it very much. I've done a debate at Oxford University Debating Society with Peter Brooksmith and company, and we won that one. And I took on Shermer on Coast to Coast Radio for 3 hours, and I got 80% of the vote there because he didn't know anything. And this is the thing. It's what aggravates me. I read his books. As a matter of fact, I quoted back some of the things he said in his book in the debate. He hadn't read mine. He started off with a totally false statement that's widely believed, mind you, that really the UFOs are only a residue effect. If you look at any strange phenomena, there'll be 5% that you can't explain. But that doesn't mean anything important is going on. Well, that gave me a hole you could drive a truck through, because I pointed out, well, in Blue Book Special Report 14, the biggest study ever done for the Air Force, 21.5% of the 3,201 sightings couldn't be identified, completely separate from the 9.3% for which there was insufficient information. I brought up the University of Colorado study, the Condon report. 30% of the 117 cases studied in detail could not be explained, according to a special UFO subcommittee of the world's largest group of space scientists, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. It was downhill from there. So these people have... I tried to get my University of Chicago classmate, Carl Sagan. We were classmates for 3 years. And I was visited with him when I spoke at Cornell. we agreed that we disagreed, and I tried to get him into a debate, and then I found out he had cancer, and so I could hardly pursue that path. But they don't want to debate anybody who knows anything. Let's face it, that's the way to look silly. Just keep making your pronouncements, your proclamations. I mean, if you know anybody who wants to debate me, let's arrange it.
Well, to be honest, I doubt anyone's going to take you up on your offer. One more. Bob Lazar made some quite wild claims about Area 51, well, S4. What do you think's behind the reasoning behind the claims of people like Bob Lazar?
Well, I have a whole piece about him on my website at www.stantonfriedman.com. He got a lot of attention, sold a lot of videos. I don't understand the motivation of a lot of people. Why do Catholic priests sometimes attack choir boys? Why do grown men attack 3-year-old girls sexually? We have an occasional serial killer in the United States. Sometimes they're thought of as being very nice guys, except for, they killed 20 people, one after the other. I don't know why people lie. I've called a number of colleges to check on credentials, and you're supposed to be able to find out if they went there. You can't get grade point averages and stuff like that. And it turns out that I asked the registrar's office gal, after I find out that the person who claimed to have gone there didn't, I said, well, do you get a lot of calls like this about people who claim to have gone there and didn't? All the time. And one person told me about a woman called and said, my fiancé has lost his diploma, and would it be possible to replace it? I think it'd make a nice gift. And she said, sure, and, give me the information. So it turned out he had never gone to that school. So I don't know what motivates people.
Greed is a great motivator. Greed is a great motivator, and people will write books and do stuff just to sell it and get money. And I really do believe that greed is one of the biggest motivators there is in the world.
Well, the proof of that is what's happened the last month, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
we do have another question, and okay. I'm just going to put it in here. Obama is asking, are aliens living among us? And a few others say they believe they are, and they wonder what you think.
Before you do answer, I'm going to say a quick goodbye to everybody, and I'll see you all back in the chat room.
Hey, take it easy, Spook.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks,
you're my love.
Questions. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Say love you loads. Ta-da.
Okay. I can't rule it out, and there's a lot of the abduction research which would indicate that one of the motivations seems to be hybridization. So maybe they're raising a bunch of spies, if you will. I mean, you can't send a tall, blonde Norwegian to be a spy in China. See, you got to make having an alien walk down the street. I mean, you might get away with that in New York or London, but not in the rest of the world. I don't think. So I have no reason to say that there are or aren't. Obviously, it would be a good way if you infiltrate society to find out a lot about society. And it seems they're here to find out a lot about us. So I have no reason to say anybody's wandering around amongst us. But that's different from saying that there are alien spacecraft hiding hither, thither, or yon. When you can take off from a space not much larger than yourself and land in a place that's not much larger than your craft, then you can hide almost anywhere. Even New Jersey, the most densely populated of all the states, there are places where you can set a craft down and nobody would know you were there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's the Garden State. There are places where people really have never go around. Even though we're doing the urban sprawl bit, there are still some green and untouched places, amazingly as it sounds. Donna also asks again, so it is a possibility. How would we go about proving it? That I wouldn't know. I mean, what are you going to do? Ask everybody for a blood test,
Well, sure. Advertise in the paper. Will all aliens please report for duty at 8 o'clock? Yeah. Well, who knows? I don't know how you smoke them out. And there are plenty of strange people on the planet. We don't need to go to aliens for strange people.
Oh, yeah. I think I have half of them on my staff, so,
Hey.
But we have another caller. I don't know who it is. Caller 605. Hello?
Oh, hey, it's Randy. Hello?
Hi, Randy.
How are you?
We're getting ready to wrap up
Good.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting ready to wrap up, Stan. I did want to talk about your book. Where can people get your book, Stan?
Well, of course, they can get it at Barnes & Noble or Amazon.com, or if they go to my website, www.stantonfriedman.com, they can get an autographed copy. You can't get that the other places. All four of my books are listed, and I send all my stuff out autographed and by priority mail. There's some DVDs. There's a lot of good stuff on the website. So www.stantonfriedman.com.
Yes. I want to thank you so much for coming on. Would you consider coming back again?
Not tomorrow.
No, not tomorrow, but I don't have a show tomorrow, so there.
He's going to be watching the spacecraft tonight.
Yeah. This is interesting. I mean, this is not my forte or anything. I'm into ghosts, but like Bob told you, I've always wondered why they would pick here to come, because obviously intelligence is not our strong suit here, and neither is charity. Starts at home. We're probably more vicious than red ants, fire ants. So I just don't understand why they would come here, and I don't understand the whole.
Don't go out there.
That's all I can. That's all I can actually even reason it. And maybe the governments, maybe they're hoping if they're nice to them and play nice, they can get a trip out of here and get out of Dodge. Well, we were nice. We gave you our cattle. We gave you our firstborn. How about letting us out of here so we can get out of purgatory? You're fascinating and you're funny, and we love you, and God bless, and thank you for coming on the show. You're a Leo, so what? You're perfect, right? Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Stan.
You're very welcome. Take it easy, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Night-night.
You too, thanks.
Night-night.
Good night.
Okay,
wow,
that was very interesting. Stanton Friedman, and he is www.stantonfriedman.com. He has 4 books. The newest one is Flying Saucers and Science. And if you want to learn something, that's what you pick up. You want to learn. That's why we're bringing people like this on. So you're learning real stuff. You're learning stuff that you can apply to make decisions, to make educated hypothesis and try to figure out what's going on, and you're not just watching sci-fi and stuff, and that's what you know about extraterrestrials, and that's what you know about the whole discussion, So we bring these people on, and I hope you'll all visit his site. I hope you'll order his book. Like he said, he'll sign it for you. So it's www.stantonfriedman.com.
Where over the rainbow birds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow, wild cat.
Thank you for visiting me at my lair. Mo Banshee Flares broadcast live on Tuesday evenings at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Pacific, and in the UK, 3 a.m. Wednesday mornings on www.gameconradio.com. You can listen to our recent recordings on Podomatic/Mo Banshee. You can contact me at www.stantonfriedman.com. asylumsgate.com. Again, thank you for listening. God bless you and yours, and have a very cool day.
Ha 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 ha.